She was buying baby formula with her last coins when a man she'd never met called her by name. Now she's living in his mansion, caught between mafia violence and unexpected love. What would you sacrifice for security when the person offering it has blood on their hands? The coins felt cold in my hand as I counted them again. $3.42. That's all I had left until Friday when I'd get paid. I sighed and looked at the baby formula on the store shelf. The cheapest one cost $19.99. My heart sank. "It's okay, Lily," I whispered to my 2-month-old daughter who was starting to fuss in her carrier. Her tiny face scrunched up, and I knew that cry was coming. The one that would echo through the whole store. I gently rocked the carrier with my foot while I tried to think. The store lights were too bright, making everything look harsh. The floor was sticky under my worn sneakers. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours at a time since Lily was born. My back hurt from my shift at the diner, and my eyes burned from staying up late to finish my online nursing homework. 6 months ago, everything was different. I had a nice little apartment, was finishing my nursing degree, and had plans for the future. Then my boyfriend left when he found out I was pregnant. The rent went up. My car broke down. Now it was just me and Lily in a tiny studio apartment with a leaky ceiling. I grabbed the smallest container of formula and walked to the checkout. My stomach growled, reminding me I'd have to put back the granola bars I'd hoped to eat for dinner. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a real meal. "Will that be all?" the cashier asked, barely looking up from her phone. "Yes, just this," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. I dumped my coins onto the counter and started counting them out loud. $1, $2, $2.50. My face felt hot as I counted. The pennies kept slipping between my fingers. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I could feel them getting impatient. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, not turning around. "I thought I had enough." "That'll be $19.99, the cashier said with a bored look. Tears burned in my eyes. I was still more than $16 short. "I guess I can't," I started to say, reaching to take back my coins. A large hand appeared beside mine, a hand with a gold ring and tiny scars across the knuckles. The hand placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "Add whatever else the lady needs," said a deep voice behind me. I turned around, startled. The man towering over me wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His blue eyes were cold, but something else lived in them when they moved to Lily. His face had a long scar running from his temple to his jaw. He looked dangerous, important, out of place in this rundown store. "I can't accept," I began. "You need it," he said. Not a question. Then his eyes softened slightly. "Why didn't you tell me things were this bad, Alice?" My heart skipped a beat. He knew my name, but I had no idea who he was. My hands shook as I clutched the grocery bag with the formula inside. The man's words kept echoing in my head. "Why didn't you tell me things were this bad, Alice?" How did he know my name? I'd never seen him before. I would have remembered those cold blue eyes, that scar, the way he seemed to fill the entire store with his presence. "Do you need a ride home?" he asked, following me outside. The night air was chilly, and I pulled Lily's blanket tighter around her carrier. "No, thank you," I said quickly. "I only live a few blocks away." That was a lie. I lived 20 minutes away by bus, but there was no way I was getting in a car with this stranger, no matter how much formula he'd bought me. He smiled slightly like he knew I was lying. "Take this then." He held out a business card. The paper felt expensive between my fingers. It said only Dominic Russo with a phone number beneath. No company name. No title. "Call me if you need anything else," he said. And I mean anything. Before I could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver jumped out and opened the back door. The man, Dominic, nodded once at me, then disappeared into the car. I stood frozen, watching as the taillights vanished around the corner. On the long bus ride home, I Googled his name on my cracked phone screen. What I found made my blood run cold. The Russo family controlled most of the waterfront district. There were newspaper articles about suspected connections to organized crime, though nothing had ever been proven. And there were whispers about how people who crossed them tended to disappear. By the time I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my apartment, the elevator had been broken for months. My mind was spinning. I didn't know why this man had singled me out, and that terrified me. I managed to push the encounter from my mind over the next day. Lily was extra fussy. My shift at the diner ran long, and I had an assignment due for my nursing program. Normal life. Safe life. But 2 days later, as I was stretching the formula to make it last longer, I found myself staring at his card again. The formula would run out tomorrow. Payday was still 2 days away. My landlord was threatening to evict us if I was late on rent again. Pride warred with desperation inside me. Lily's hungry cries settled the battle. I called the number with shaking fingers, half hoping it wouldn't connect. It rang twice. "Alice?" he answered, not a question, like he'd been waiting for my call. "How do you know my name?" I demanded. "We should talk in person," he said. "I'll send a car." "No, I don't want—" But he had already hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text. "There's a car outside waiting." I peeked out my window and saw the same black car from the store. I packed Lily's diaper bag, trying to ignore the hammering of my heart. What was I doing? This was crazy. But when I looked at my nearly empty kitchen and thought about the eviction notice taped to my door, I knew I didn't have many choices left. The driver didn't speak as he held the door open for me. The car smelled like leather and expensive cologne. He drove us to a restaurant where men in suits opened doors and women wore jewelry that probably cost more than everything I owned. "I can't go in there," I whispered, looking down at my worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "I'm not dressed for this." "Mr. Russo is waiting in the private room," the driver said, the first words he'd spoken. "No one will see you." A host led us through the main dining room, past tables of people who didn't even glance our way, to a small room in the back. Dominic stood when we entered, his eyes immediately going to Lily. "She's grown already," he said softly, then gestured to the table set with fine china and crystal glasses. "Please, sit." "You've got me confused with someone," I said, standing my ground. "I don't know you." His smile was small, calculating. "But I know you, Alice Chen. Your father owed my family money before he disappeared." "A lot of money." The floor seemed to drop from under me. My dad had vanished 2 years ago, leaving only a cryptic note about dangerous people he'd gotten involved with. Mom and I had never understood what happened. "I don't have his money," I said, clutching Lily tighter. "I barely have enough for formula." "I'm aware." He gestured again to the chair. "Please, I'm not going to hurt you. If I wanted to, I wouldn't have bothered buying you formula." I sat slowly, keeping Lily's carrier on my lap like a shield. "Your father borrowed $50,000 from my family," he said, pouring water into my glass. "With interest, it's closer to $80,000 now." My mouth went dry. "I work at a diner, I make tips. I can't pay that." "I'm not asking you to pay it." He studied me with those cold blue eyes. "I have a proposition. My mother is dying. Cancer. She needs private nursing care, someone to live in and tend to her. The hospice nurses only come twice a week. It's not enough." "I haven't finished my nursing degree yet," I said, confused. "You've completed enough to handle her medications and basic care. Her doctor would still oversee everything." He leaned forward. "The salary would solve your problems. You and your daughter would have your own rooms in our home, all expenses covered. I stared at him, trying to see the catch. Why me? You could hire anyone. My mother believes in signs. He glanced at Lily. She says children bring luck to a house. And… He paused. I've had you investigated since our meeting. You're studying hard despite your circumstances. You've never been in trouble. You care for your daughter even when it means going without yourself. The idea that he'd been looking into my life sent a chill through me. So, you've been watching me? Protecting my investment, he corrected. Your father's debt is still on my books. Consider this a way for both of us to settle it. It felt like a deal with the devil. But as Lily stirred against me, making the little sounds that meant she'd be hungry soon, I realized I was out of options. When would I start? I asked. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Tomorrow, the car will pick you up at 9. As we left the restaurant, my mind raced with questions about what I'd just agreed to, but one thought kept pushing through. For the first time in months, I wouldn't have to worry about how to feed my baby tomorrow. The car arrived exactly at 9 the next morning. I had packed everything we owned into 2 worn suitcases and Lily's diaper bag. It wasn't much. The driver put my things in the trunk without a word. I settled into the back seat with Lily in her carrier, watching my rundown apartment building disappear as we drove away. Part of me wondered if I'd ever see it again. We drove for nearly an hour, leaving the cramped city streets and moving into neighborhoods where the houses got bigger and the lawns got greener. Finally, we turned onto a private road that wound through tall iron gates. Guards nodded to the driver as we passed. My stomach twisted with nerves. The Russo house wasn't just a house. It was a mansion of stone and glass perched on a hill overlooking the bay. Flower gardens spread out on all sides. A fountain bubbled in the circular driveway. It looked like something from a movie, not a place where real people lived. Welcome to your new home, the driver said as he opened my door. It was the first thing he'd said the whole drive. Dominic waited at the top of the wide stone steps. Today he wore no suit jacket, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, showing strong forearms marked with faded tattoos. In the daylight, his scar looked even more jagged against his tan skin. You came? He said, sounding almost surprised. Did you think I wouldn't? I asked, clutching Lily's carrier tighter. People tend to change their minds about deals with me overnight. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Come, I'll show you to your rooms, then introduce you to my mother. We entered a grand hall with a ceiling so high it made me dizzy to look up. Paintings that looked old and important hung on walls of dark wood. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floor. The main house has 15 rooms, Dominic explained as we walked. My mother's suite is in the east wing. You and Lily will be right next door. I tried not to stare at everything we passed. A room filled with books from floor to ceiling. A dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. A kitchen where 3 staff members worked, all pausing to nod respectfully as we passed. This is Mrs. Vasquez, Dominic said, introducing a round-faced woman stirring something that smelled wonderful on the stove. She'll make anything you or Lily need. Special formula, baby food when it's time, just ask. Mrs. Vasquez smiled warmly. The little one is welcome in my kitchen anytime. We continued upstairs where Dominic opened double doors to reveal what would be our rooms. There was a sitting area with soft couches, a bedroom with the biggest bed I'd ever seen, and a small second bedroom already set up with a white crib and changing table. This is too much, I whispered, setting Lily's carrier on the floor. She was awake now, looking around with wide eyes. It's not enough, Dominic said quietly. Not after what my family took from yours. Before I could ask what he meant, a man appeared in the doorway. He wore a gun in a shoulder holster, not trying to hide it. Boss, the Colombians are here early, the man said, his eyes flicking to me before looking away. I'll be right down, Marco. Dominic turned to me. Get settled. Mrs. Vasquez will bring you lunch. I'll come for you at 3 to meet my mother. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in this beautiful, strange place. I walked to the window and looked out at the grounds below. Men with guns patrolled near the gates. A group of serious-looking men in dark suits were being led into the house through a side entrance. What kind of world had I just stepped into? I spent the next few hours unpacking our few belongings, feeling embarrassed by how little we had. My worn clothes looked out of place in the massive cedar closet. Lily seemed happy, though, kicking her legs on a soft blanket I spread on the floor. At exactly 3, there was a knock at my door. Dominic stood there, now in a full suit again. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than before. Ready? He asked. I nodded, picking up Lily. We walked down a long hallway to another wing of the house. Dominic stopped outside a door where a nurse in scrubs sat at a small desk. This is Alice Chen, Dominic told the nurse. She'll be taking over Maria's duties starting tomorrow. The nurse looked me up and down. You'll need to review Mrs. Russo's medication schedule. It's complicated. She handed me a thick folder. I'll be back on Thursday for my regular check. Dominic led me into a large, sunny room. Heavy curtains were pulled back from tall windows that looked out over the bay. The room smelled of flowers and medicine. In a hospital bed by the window sat a tiny woman with silver hair. Her skin was pale and paper-thin, but her eyes, the same icy blue as Dominic's, were bright and alert. "Mama, this is Alice," Dominic said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "And her daughter, Lily." Mrs. Russo's face lit up. "Bring the baby closer," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. My eyes aren't what they used to be. I stepped forward, holding Lily so the old woman could see her. Mrs. Russo reached out a bony hand and touched Lily's cheek. "She has old eyes," Mrs. Russo said. "A wise soul in a new body. Like you, Dominic." She looked up at me. "You're the one from the store, yes? The one my son couldn't stop talking about?" Dominic cleared his throat. "Alice will be taking care of you now, Mama. She's studying to be a nurse." Mrs. Russo patted the edge of her bed. "Sit, child. Tell me about yourself while my son runs his empire." Dominic gave his mother a look of fond exasperation. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," he said, then turned to me. "Find me when you're done. My office is down the main staircase, first door on the right." After he left, Mrs. Russo took my hand in her cool, dry one. "He thinks I don't know what he does," she said, as if a mother doesn't know everything about her child. She smiled sadly. "This house has rules, Alice. Rules that keep people safe." "What rules?" I asked. "Don't ask about the meetings in the study. Don't speak of what you might overhear. Don't wander the grounds after dark." Her grip on my hand tightened. "And never, ever go into the basement." A chill ran down my spine. "Mrs. Russo—" "Call me Sophia," she interrupted. "We're family now, whether you know it yet or not." That evening, after putting Lily to bed in her new crib, I found my way to Dominic's office. The door was ajar and I could hear voices inside. I knocked softly. "Come in," Dominic called. I pushed open the door to find him sitting behind a massive desk, while 2 men stood in front of it. All 3 turned to look at me. The men quickly looked away, as if they'd been told not to stare. "Give us a minute," Dominic told the men, who nodded and left, closing the door behind them. "Your mother seems to like Lily," I said, not knowing where to begin. "My mother likes anyone who makes me show human emotion," he replied dryly. "Are the rooms comfortable?" I nodded. "They're beautiful, but I need to understand what I've gotten into here. Your mother mentioned rules." Dominic's face hardened slightly. "For your safety, And Lily's. This house, my business, attracts attention. Not all of it welcome. What exactly is your business? I asked, though I was starting to put it together. The guards, the guns, the meetings. Import, export, real estate, waste management. His smile was tight. All perfectly legal on paper. He stood up and came around the desk. Alice, all you need to know is that you and Lily are under my protection now. No one will harm you here. But in return, I need your discretion. See nothing. Say nothing. I swallowed hard. And if I can't do that? He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Then our arrangement ends. You go back to counting pennies for formula. Is that what you want? I thought about Lily sleeping peacefully in a safe, warm room, about not having to worry about food or rent for the first time in months. No, I said quietly. That's not what I want. Good. He touched my arm briefly. Now get some rest. Your training with the day nurse starts early tomorrow. As I walked back to my room, I passed a window overlooking the driveway. Men were loading something into the trunk of a car. Their movements were quick, furtive. I stepped back into the shadows, remembering Mrs. Russo's first rule: don't ask about the meetings. I was officially in Dominic Russo's world now. The question was whether I could survive it. 2 weeks passed in a blur of new routines. I learned Mrs. Russo's medication schedule, how to check her vitals, and the small comforts that eased her pain. During the day, I moved between caring for Lily and tending to Mrs. Russo, who insisted the baby stay in her room during my shifts. At night, I studied my nursing textbooks in the quiet luxury of my new rooms. She's smiling more, Mrs. Russo said one morning as she watched me change Lily on a blanket spread across the foot of her bed. Babies know when they're safe. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if any of us were truly safe here. In 2 weeks, I'd seen enough to know that Dominic Russo was more than a businessman. Men came and went at all hours. Hushed conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Once, I'd heard shouting from Dominic's office, followed by the sound of breaking glass. But I'd also seen unexpected things. Like now, as Dominic appeared in the doorway of his mother's room, a book tucked under his arm. Right on time, Mrs. Russo said with a smile. Alice, did you know my son reads to me every day at 10? Never misses, no matter how busy he is. I looked up, surprised. Dominic avoided my eyes as he pulled a chair next to his mother's bed. The book was old, with a worn leather cover and pages yellowed with age. It's Dante, Mrs. Russo told me. In the original Italian, Dominic has the most beautiful accent. I gathered Lily into my arms. I'll give you privacy. Stay. Mrs. Russo patted the edge of her bed. It's good for the baby to hear different languages. Dominic finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Do you mind? No, I said, sitting down carefully on the bed. He opened the book and began to read. His voice changed completely, becoming rich and musical. The harsh edges softened as the Italian words flowed from his tongue. I didn't understand a word, but found myself mesmerized by the cadence, by the way his scarred face transformed when he read. When he finished the passage, he closed the book gently. Mrs. Russo had fallen asleep, her breathing deep and even. She never makes it through a full chapter anymore, he said softly, tucking the blanket around her shoulders. I didn't know you spoke Italian, I said. My grandfather insisted. Said we should remember where we came from. He stood up, looking uncomfortable. I have meetings all afternoon. Will you be okay with her? I nodded, and he left quickly, as if embarrassed to have shown me this softer side of himself. The next day, I was giving Mrs. Russo her bath when she suddenly took my wrist in a surprisingly strong grip. Tell me about your father, she said. I froze. My father? The one who borrowed money from my son, Her blue eyes pierced me. The one who disappeared. I hesitated, then decided truth was safer than lies in this house. He was a gambling addict. He'd be fine for years, then fall off the wagon. My mom kicked him out when I was 16 because of it. He'd still visit me sometimes, usually to ask for money. 2 years ago, he left me a note saying he was in trouble with dangerous people and had to disappear. I never heard from him again. Mrs. Russo's eyes softened. My husband was the same. A gambler. A risk-taker. It's why Dominic is so careful now. She released my wrist. Your father took something that wasn't his when he ran. Something important to my family. I didn't know. I whispered, wondering what else Dominic hadn't told me. Of course you didn't. She patted my cheek. That's why you're still here. That evening, unable to sleep, I wandered down to the kitchen for tea. The house was quiet except for the distant murmur of voices from Dominic's study. As I passed the library, I noticed a light on inside. Curious, I peeked in. Dominic sat in a leather armchair, his Dante book open in his lap, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked up when the floor creaked beneath my feet. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much on my mind, I admitted, stepping into the room. It smelled of old books and wood polish. Your mother mentioned my father took something from your family. Dominic's face hardened. She shouldn't have told you that. But it's true. He sighed, setting down his glass. Yes, but that's not your burden to carry. I moved closer, drawn to him despite my better judgment. Then why am I here? Why did you really bring me to this house? He looked at me for a long moment. At first, it was about finding your father. I thought you might know where he went. His voice softened. But then I saw you in that store, counting pennies for your daughter's formula. You reminded me of my sister. You have a sister? In all my time here, I'd never heard mention of one. Had, he corrected, his voice tight. Leukemia. She was 12. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. He shrugged, a gesture meant to seem casual but failing to hide his pain. It was a long time ago. We fell silent. Outside, rain began to patter against the windows. You could have hired any nurse, I said finally. Why me? My mother believes in signs. He looked down at his book. When I saw you and Lily that night, something told me to help you. He met my eyes again, and I'm not in the habit of ignoring my instincts. Something shifted between us in that moment, a wall coming down, or perhaps a bridge being built. The next morning, I found Lily fussing in her crib. Her cheeks were flushed, her forehead hot to the touch. Panic gripped me. Mrs. Vasquez, I called, rushing downstairs with Lily wailing in my arms. Where's the children's medicine? The housekeeper looked up from the stove, alarmed. Is the baby sick? She has a fever, I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I bounced Lily in my arms. She needs medicine. I'll call the doctor, a voice said behind me. Dominic stood in the doorway, still in his running clothes, sweat glistening on his forehead. Without hesitation, he crossed the room and held his hands out. May I? Surprised, I let him take Lily. His large hands cradled her tiny body with unexpected gentleness. He placed his lips against her forehead, testing her temperature. Not too high, he said, rocking her with the practiced ease of someone who'd held babies before. But we'll have Dr. Evans come right away. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later. By then, Lily's fever had already started to break with the children's medicine Mrs. Vasquez had found. I watched, amazed, as Dominic stood by, refusing to leave until the doctor confirmed it was just a mild virus. She'll be fine in a day or two, Dr. Evans assured us, packing up his bag. As he left, he nodded respectfully to Dominic. Give my regards to your mother, Mr. Russo. With Lily sleeping peacefully in my arms, I looked up at Dominic. Thank you. His eyes softened as he looked at Lily. No child should suffer if we can prevent it. That afternoon, a package arrived from the city. A top-of-the-line baby monitor, medicine, and soft new clothes for Lily. I found Dominic in his study to thank him. "It's nothing," he said, not looking up from his papers. But the tips of his ears reddened slightly. Days turned into weeks. Spring bloomed in the gardens outside. Mrs. Russo grew weaker, but her mind remained sharp. She told stories of Italy, of Dominic as a stubborn child, of family celebrations that filled the house with laughter. I began to see glimpses of what this family had been before darkness crept in. Dominic and I fell into an unexpected rhythm. He'd join me for late dinners after Lily was asleep. Sometimes we'd talk. Other times we'd sit in comfortable silence. He never mentioned my father again, and I never asked about his business. It was a careful dance around the truth. One evening, as thunder rumbled outside, the lights flickered and went out. I hurried to check on Mrs. Russo, flashlight in hand. She was sleeping peacefully, her oxygen machine switched to its battery backup. As I turned to leave, a crash sounded from downstairs, followed by shouting. Gunshots cracked through the night. I froze, heart pounding. Heavy footsteps ran up the stairs. I pressed myself against the wall, terrified. The door flew open, and Dominic stood there, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Are you okay?" he demanded, scanning the room. "Is my mother safe?" "We're fine," I whispered. "What's happening?" "Riviera's men," he said grimly. "They found a way past the gates." He crossed to the window, checking the locks. "Stay in here. Don't open the door for anyone but me." "Dominic." I reached for him without thinking, my fingers brushing his arm. He caught my hand, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light. For one breathless moment, the world outside ceased to exist. Then he pulled away. "I have to keep you safe," he said, voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. "All of you." After he left, I sank to the floor, back against the wall. The gunfire had stopped, but I could hear men shouting in the distance. In that moment, as fear and something else entirely battled inside me, I realized with terrifying clarity that I was falling for a dangerous man, and there was no going back. Morning after the attack brought a heavy silence to the house. Men in suits came and went, speaking in hushed voices. Windows were being replaced in the West Wing. Mrs. Russo seemed unbothered by it all, as if midnight gunfights were simply part of life here. "Did anyone get hurt?" I asked her as I checked her blood pressure. "No one who matters," she replied, watching me with those sharp blue eyes. "You're worried about my son." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer, focusing instead on reading the numbers on the machine. "He likes you," she continued. "I haven't seen him smile so much since before his father died." "Mrs. Russo." "Sophia," she corrected gently. "Sophia," I tried again. "Your son and we're from different worlds." She laughed softly. "Worlds can collide, my dear. Sometimes that's exactly what they need to do." Later that day, I took Lily for a walk in the garden. The spring air smelled of freshly cut grass and roses. Guards watched from a distance, more of them than usual since the attack. I tried to pretend they weren't there as I pointed out butterflies to Lily, who watched with wide, curious eyes from her stroller. "She's growing so fast," said a voice behind me. Dominic stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. The cut above his eye had been stitched closed. "Babies do that," I said, smiling despite myself. "One day they're tiny, the next they're ready to take on the world." He came closer, peering down at Lily. "She has your eyes." "And her father's chin, unfortunately," I sighed. "Where is he?" Dominic asked, his tone careful. "Lily's father." "Gone," I said simply. "He left when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't father material. Haven't heard from him since." Anger flashed across Dominic's face. Some men don't deserve the family they're given. We walked in silence for a while, following the winding path through the rose garden. There's a party tomorrow night, he said suddenly. For my mother's birthday. Nothing big, just family and close friends. She'd like you and Lily to be there. I don't have anything to wear to a party, I admitted. Already taken care of. He smiled slightly. Check your closet when you get back. Sure enough, when I returned to my room, I found 3 beautiful dresses hanging there, with tiny matching outfits for Lily. My heart did a funny little flip. It was thoughtful in a way I hadn't expected from him. The party was small by Russo standards, which still meant 30 people in the grand dining room. Mrs. Russo sat at the head of the table in a wheelchair, looking more alive than she had in weeks. Lily stayed with us, passed around and admired by everyone. You look beautiful, Dominic whispered when he found me by the windows, watching the sunset over the bay. The blue dress I'd chosen matched his eyes in a way that couldn't be accidental. Thank you, I said, suddenly shy. For everything. His hand brushed mine, just briefly. My mother says you're a natural nurse, that you have healing hands. Before I could respond, a tall woman in a red dress approached us. Her smile was tight as she kissed Dominic's cheek. Dominic, darling, you've been hiding your new friend? Her eyes swept over me, cold and assessing. I'm Vivian Marconi. Alice Chen, I said, extending my hand. I'm Mrs. Russo's nurse. Oh, is that what they're calling it now? She laughed, a tinkling sound with no warmth. Dominic always did have a soft spot for strays. Dominic's jaw tightened. Vivian, I think your husband is looking for you. She touched his arm, letting her hand linger. We still need to discuss the merger, darling. Daddy's getting impatient. After she swanned away, Dominic looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry about that. Vivian's father and mine were old friends. She thinks that entitles her to certain expectations. She's beautiful, I said, hating the jealousy in my voice. She's a viper, he replied flatly, and not what I want. His eyes held mine, and for a moment I forgot about the party. About the house full of dangerous men, about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Then Lily started crying from across the room, breaking the spell. The next morning, I found a gift box on my dresser. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a lily. The card read simply, "Thank you for last night, D." I was fastening it around my wrist when there was a knock at my door. Marco, Dominic's right-hand man, stood there looking uncomfortable. Mr. Russo asked me to take you shopping, he said, not quite meeting my eyes, for anything you or the baby need. That's not necessary, I began, but he cut me off. Boss's orders. Car's waiting whenever you're ready. Downtown was a 40-minute drive from the Russo estate. As we pulled up to an upscale baby boutique, I noticed a black SUV following us. Marco saw me looking. Protection detail, he explained, opening my door. After the attack, Mr. Russo isn't taking chances. I spent the next 2 hours picking out clothes, toys, and supplies for Lily, trying not to look at price tags. Marco carried the bags without complaint, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. As we left the last store, a coffee shop across the street caught my eye. Do we have time for coffee? I asked. Marco checked his watch. Sure. Boss won't be back until tonight anyway. Some business in the city. I ordered a latte and found a table by the window while Marco talked to the protection detail outside. The coffee was just being placed in front of me when someone slid into the chair across from me. Ms. Chen, I'm Detective James Reyes, City Police. He showed me a badge quickly, then tucked it away. I need to talk to you about Dominic Russo. My blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. His voice was low, urgent. You've been living in his house for over a month now. Taking care of his mother, yes, but also seeing things, hearing things. I glanced outside. Marco was still talking to the security men, his back to the window. Whatever you think you know about me, I started. I know your father stole evidence from the Russos before he disappeared, Reyes interrupted. Evidence that could put Dominic away for 20 years. And I know Dominic found you to get to him. That's not true, I said, but doubt crept into my voice. Was that the real reason Dominic had approached me that night? Isn't it? Reyes slid a file across the table. Open it. With shaking hands, I flipped it open. Inside were photographs, men lying in pools of blood, crime scenes, and in one, Dominic standing over a kneeling man, gun in hand. This is who you're living with, Reyes said softly. This is who you've let near your daughter. I closed the file, feeling sick. What do you want from me? Help us build a case. Tell us what you've seen, what you've heard. We can protect you and your baby. And if I don't, then you're an accessory. His eyes were hard now. Think about your daughter, Ms. Chen. Is this the life you want for her? Growing up in a house of killers? He slid a card across the table. Call me when you're ready to do the right thing. I took the card, tucking it into my pocket just as Marco turned back toward the window. Detective Reyes was gone before Marco re-entered the coffee shop. Everything okay? Marco asked, frowning at my untouched coffee. You look pale. Just tired, I lied. Can we go home now? Home. When had I started thinking of the Russo mansion as home? That night, I put Lily to bed and went to check on Mrs. Russo one last time. She was awake, watching the door as if expecting me. You met someone today, she said. It wasn't a question. Someone who told you things about my son. I froze. How did you? These walls have eyes, child. And I've been in this family long enough to recognize when the police have made contact. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. Sit. There are things you should know. I sat, the detective's card burning a hole in my pocket. Outside, I heard a car pull up. Dominic was home. My son has done things, Mrs. Russo said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Terrible things sometimes. But he has his reasons, and he has never hurt an innocent. She took my hand in hers. The question is, Alice Chen, do you trust him enough to give him a chance to explain? Before I could answer, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Mrs. Russo squeezed my hand once, then let go. A moment later, Dominic appeared in the doorway, his eyes finding mine immediately. Something in his expression told me he already knew about Detective Reyes. Alice, he said softly, we need to talk. I followed Dominic to his study, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The room was dark except for a single lamp on his desk. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. The smell of leather and wood polish filled the air. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows like tiny fingers tapping the glass. Sit, Dominic said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He didn't sound angry, but his face was hard to read in the dim light. I sat, trying to keep my hands from shaking. How did you know? That you met with Detective Reyes? He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal bottle. Marco saw him leave the coffee shop. Recognized him from past encounters. He set 1 glass in front of me. Drink. You look like you need it. The liquid burned my throat but spread warmth through my chest. Are you having me followed? Protected, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? I pulled the detective's card from my pocket and placed it on the desk between us. He showed me pictures. Terrible pictures. Dominic didn't look at the card. His eyes stayed on mine. And you believed them. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I don't know what to believe anymore. My voice cracked. He said you only found me to get to my father, that my father stole evidence against you before he disappeared. Dominic was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the rain and the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Yes, he said finally. Your father took something that belonged to my family, but that's not why I approached you that night at the store. Then why? I demanded, my fear giving way to anger. Why me? Why Lily? He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. Because when I saw you counting those coins, trying to feed your daughter, I saw someone who deserved better. Someone who'd been let down by the men who should have protected her. His voice roughened. Just like my sister. Your sister who died, I said softly. My sister who died because my father wouldn't pay for her treatment. He corrected, bitterness edging his words. He said it was too expensive, a waste of money on a girl. She was 12 years old. I sat back, stunned. That's horrible? That's my father. His smile was grim. The great Vincent Russo built this empire, ruled it with fear. Everyone thought he was so powerful. He drained his glass, but he couldn't save his own daughter, wouldn't even try. And that's why you care about your mother so much, I realized. Why you never miss reading to her. He nodded. She stood up to him for us, took the beating so we wouldn't have to. His eyes darkened. When he finally died, I promised her she'd never suffer again. Dominic. I leaned forward, not sure what to say. Part of me wanted to reach for his hand, but I held back. The detective said you're a killer. I've killed, he admitted, not looking away. Men who would have killed me, men who threatened my family. He refilled his glass. This world, my father's world, it doesn't allow for weakness. Show mercy once, and they smell blood in the water. I thought about the night of the attack, the gunshots in the dark, Dominic's face streaked with blood as he made sure we were safe. What did my father take? I asked. He hesitated. Financial records, names, dates, evidence that could destroy not just me, but everyone who works for me. He paused. Everyone who depends on me. Like Mrs. Vasquez? Marco? Everyone, he confirmed. 300 families get their paychecks from Russo Enterprises. Most of them have nothing to do with the less legal aspects of the business. I stood up suddenly, needing to move. The room felt too small, too warm. I should pack our things. Lily and we shouldn't be here. Dominic didn't try to stop me as I walked to the window, watching the rain stream down the glass. You can leave any time you want, he said quietly. I'm not keeping you prisoner. Aren't you? I turned to face him. Your men follow me everywhere. Your mother says the walls have eyes. There are guns in every room of this house. For protection. From who? I cried. Your enemies? The police? Your father's ghost? He stood now too, his face tight with anger. From people who would use you and Lily to get to me. From people who would hurt you just to watch me suffer. Like Detective Reyes. Reyes is just a cop doing his job, Dominic said dismissively, but he's naive if he thinks taking me down will make this city safer. There are worse people waiting to fill the void, people who don't care about collateral damage. I sank back into the chair, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. I don't know how to be here, knowing what I know now. Dominic came around the desk, kneeling in front of my chair. It was such a strange sight, this powerful, dangerous man on his knees before me, that I nearly laughed. Then go, he said simply. Take Lily and go. I'll make sure you have money, a new place to live. You can finish your nursing degree. Start fresh. Just like that? I asked, suspicious. Just like that. His hand hovered near mine but didn't touch it. All I ask is that you don't talk to Reyes. Not for my sake, but for everyone else who would be hurt. I looked into his eyes, searching for deceit but finding only raw honesty. And if I stay? If you stay, nothing changes. You care for my mother. You raise your daughter. You finish your degree. His voice softened. And maybe, someday, you might see me as something more than a monster. The weight of the choice pressed down on me. I thought about my tiny apartment with the leaking ceiling, about counting coins for baby formula, about the loneliness. But I also thought about the photos Detective Reyes had shown me. The blood. The guns. The constant danger that surrounded this house. I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Dominic nodded, standing up. Take all the time you need. That night, I couldn't sleep. I packed our bags, then unpacked them, packed them again. Each time, I got as far as the door before turning back. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Wind howling around the house like a living thing. I checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. I touched the gold bracelet around my wrist, the Lily charm catching the faint light. A soft knock at my door startled me. I opened it to find Mrs. Vasquez, still in her uniform despite the late hour. Mrs. Russo is asking for you, she said, her kind face worried. She's not doing well. I hurried to the east wing, all thoughts of leaving pushed aside. Mrs. Russo lay in her bed, her breathing labored, her skin ashen. Alice, she whispered when she saw me. Come closer. I sat beside her, automatically checking her pulse. It was weak, thready. Should I call the doctor? No time, she said, her blue eyes, so like Dominic's, bright with fever. Need to tell you about Dominic. About his father. Shh, I soothed, reaching for the oxygen mask. Save your strength. Her bony fingers clutched my wrist with surprising force. Listen, Vincent beat him. Every day. Made him watch as he hurt people. Said it would make him strong. Her breathing grew more labored. He fought back. Protected his sister. Paid the price. Tears filled my eyes. Mrs. Russo, please. Sophia, she corrected, the ghost of a smile on her lips. My son. He built walls. High walls. But you're getting through. She squeezed my hand. Don't give up on him. Promise me. Before I could answer, her eyes rolled back and the monitors began to wail. I hit the emergency button, shouting for help. Dominic burst through the door seconds later, his face white with fear. The next hour was a blur. The doctor came and went. Mrs. Russo stabilized. But barely. Dawn was breaking when the doctor finally left, his face grave as he spoke to Dominic in the hallway. She won't last the week, he said softly, not knowing I could hear. I'm sorry, Dominic. I stepped back into the shadows as Dominic thanked the doctor and showed him out. When he turned back, I could see the raw pain on his face. Without thinking, I moved toward him, touching his arm gently. I'm so sorry, I whispered. His control broke then. He pulled me against his chest, his body shaking with silent sobs. I held him, feeling his heart pound against mine, smelling the faint scent of his cologne mingled with coffee and rain. For a moment there was no detective, no photos, no decision to make. Just this man, breaking apart in my arms. Later that morning, I found my packed bags still by the door of my room. I stared at them for a long time, thinking about Mrs. Russo's words, about promises, about walls coming down. I unpacked the bags one last time, hanging my few clothes back in the massive closet. As I did, my hand brushed against Detective Reyes's card in my pocket. I took it out, looking at the crisp white cardstock, the embossed phone number. Then I tore it into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet. I had made my choice. for better or worse. I just hoped I wouldn't come to regret it. Mrs. Russo died 3 days later, slipping away in her sleep while Dominic read to her from Dante. I was checking her vitals when her breathing changed, becoming shallow, then stopping altogether. The monitor flatlined, its high-pitched wail filling the room. Dominic's voice faltered, then stopped. He closed the book slowly, his knuckles white against the worn leather cover. "She's gone," I whispered, though we both already knew. Dominic nodded once, his face a mask of control. He leaned forward and kissed his mother's forehead, murmuring something in Italian that I couldn't understand. Then he stood and walked out of the room without looking at me, his back rigid, shoulders squared. The funeral was held 2 days later. Hundreds of people came to the old stone church in the city. Men in expensive suits with hard eyes. Women dripping in jewels, their faces carefully arranged in expressions of sorrow. I sat in the front pew with Lily in my arms, feeling out of place despite the black dress Dominic had bought me for the occasion. Dominic spoke about his mother with a voice that never wavered, though I could see the cost of that control in the tension of his jaw, the whiteness of his knuckles. He talked about her strength, her kindness, her unwavering love. Not once did he cry. After the service, people approached him to offer condolences. They nodded at me curiously as they passed. I heard whispers behind cupped hands. "Who's the girl with the baby?" "His new plaything," I heard. "Won't last long, not after what happened to the last one." Vivian Marconi appeared at my side as if conjured by the whispers, her red lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Such a shame about Sophia," she said, watching Dominic across the room. "She was the only one who could control him, you know." "He doesn't need controlling," I replied, bouncing Lily gently as she began to fuss. Vivian laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. "Oh, honey, you have no idea what he's capable of." She leaned closer, her expensive perfume making my head spin. "Did he tell you what happened to his wife?" My stomach dropped. "Wife?" "Ex-wife," she corrected with a smirk. "Vanished 4 years ago. Just packed up and left, supposedly." She arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Strange that no one's heard from her since, don't you think?" Before I could respond, Marco appeared at my side. "Mr. Russo is looking for you," he said, pointedly ignoring Vivian. He led me through the crowd to where Dominic stood with a group of older men. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Dominic said when he saw us. He guided me away, his hand warm on the small of my back. "I see Vivian found you." "She mentioned your wife," I said quietly. His face hardened. "Ex-wife. And whatever Vivian told you was likely a lie." "She said she disappeared." "She left?" he corrected. "After I caught her stealing from the family accounts. She's living quite comfortably in Argentina now, as far as I know." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Is that what you wanted to know?" I nodded, not entirely convinced, but unwilling to push further. "Not today." "I'm sorry about your mother." His expression softened slightly. "Thank you for being there, for helping her at the end." The days after the funeral were strange and silent. Dominic buried himself in work, often not returning to the house until long after Lily and I were asleep. When I did see him, his eyes were distant, his responses short. It was as if he'd built his walls twice as high since his mother died. A week after the funeral, I was in the garden with Lily when Marco found me. "Boss wants to see you," he said, in his study. Dominic was on the phone when I entered, but he waved me in. "It'll be handled," he said to whoever was on the other end. "Tonight." He hung up and turned to me. "How are you settling in?" "Fine," I said, surprised by the question. "Lily loves the garden." He nodded, seeming distracted. "Good. That's good." He paused, then pushed a folder across his desk toward me. I've set up a trust for Lily, for her education, future needs, and there's a separate account for you to finish your degree. I stared at the folder without touching it. Why are you doing this now? I should have done it sooner, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. There are no guarantees in this life. What does that mean? It means I want to make sure you're taken care of. He stood up, moving to the window. I have to go away for a few days. Business in the city. Something in his voice made me uneasy. What kind of business? The kind you don't want to know about, he said, his voice hardening. Dominic. Don't. He cut me off. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. I felt anger flare inside me. After everything, you're still shutting me out? He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. No, I said, stepping closer to him. You're hiding. Just like you've always done. Behind your walls, behind your business, behind your father's ghost. His eyes flashed dangerously. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you're planning something dangerous, I insisted. Something that has you setting up trust funds and saying goodbye without actually saying it. This isn't your concern. It became my concern the moment you bought that formula, I said, my voice rising. The moment you brought me into this house, into your life. I was close enough now to see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, to feel the heat radiating from his body. The moment I decided to stay. For a heartbeat we stood frozen. Then something broke in his expression. Riviera killed my cousin last night, he said, his voice low and tight. Left his body on the steps of the church where we buried my mother. A message. I felt cold spreading through me. And you're going after him. I have to, he said simply. Blood demands blood in this world. In your father's world, I corrected. Not yours. It doesn't have to be yours. He shook his head. You don't understand. If I don't respond, I look weak. If I look weak, they'll come for everything. Everyone. His eyes met mine. Including you and Lily. There has to be another way, I pleaded. Talk to Detective Reyes. Make a deal. A deal? He laughed bitterly. What would you have me do? Turn state's evidence? Spend the next 20 years in prison while Riviera's people hunt down everyone I've ever cared about? His hand came up to touch my cheek, so gently it made my heart ache. Including you. I could leave, I whispered. Take Lily somewhere safe until it's over. No, he said firmly. I need to know you're here, protected. Marco will stay with you. There are 20 men on the grounds. He stepped back, his face hardening into resolve. I'll be back in 3 days. And if you're not? I asked, my voice breaking. Then the trust funds activate automatically, he said. And you take Lily and disappear. Start a new life, somewhere far from here. I shook my head, tears spilling over. That's not what I want. What do you want, Alice? He asked quietly. You, I said simply. I want you to come back. I want you to be better than this world your father built. I want you to choose something besides blood and vengeance. For a moment I saw longing in his eyes, so raw it took my breath away. Then it was gone, replaced by cold resolve. Sometimes we don't get what we want, he said, stepping away from me. I have to do this. For my cousin. For my family's honor. For your father's approval, I said softly, even from the grave. His head snapped up, eyes flashing with anger. You know nothing about it. I know you're still trying to be the son he wanted, I pressed on, the strong one, the ruthless one. But your mother told me the truth before she died. How you protected your sister. How you paid the price. I moved closer again, refusing to let him retreat. That's who you really are, Dominic. The protector, not the destroyer. You see what you want to see, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice. I see you, I countered. All of you. The man who reads Dante to his dying mother, who cradles my daughter when she's sick, who looks at me like I'm something precious. I took his hand, pressing it against my heart. And I'm asking you to choose a different path. Not just for me, but for yourself. His fingers curled against mine, warm and strong. For a long moment we stood in silence, the weight of his decision hanging between us. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. He checked the display, his expression shuddering closed again. I have to take this, he said, pulling away. We'll talk when I get back. If you go through with this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, there might not be anything left to talk about. His eyes met mine one last time, filled with something that might have been regret. Then he answered the phone, turning away from me. I left his study with my heart in my throat, knowing that his choice tonight would determine everything about our future, if we even had one. 3 days passed with no word from Dominic. I paced the halls of the mansion, jumping at every sound, rushing to the windows whenever a car approached. Marco shadowed me silently, his face giving away nothing when I asked for news. The guards at the gate doubled, then tripled. Men with guns patrolled the grounds day and night. On the 4th morning, I woke to the sound of helicopters circling overhead. Blue and red lights flashed through my bedroom windows. I grabbed Lily from her crib and ran to the hallway, where I nearly collided with Marco. Police, he said, his voice tight. Dozens of them. FBI too. Dominic? I clutched Lily tighter as she began to fuss. Marco shook his head. No word. But there was a raid downtown last night. Riviera's main club. 5 dead. My blood ran cold. And Dominic, was he? Unknown. Marco cut me off. He pressed a set of keys into my hand. Take the tunnel from the wine cellar. There's a car waiting half a mile down the road. The address is programmed in the GPS. Go. Now. I can't just leave, I protested. What if he comes back? What if he's hurt? Marco's eyes softened slightly. The boss made me promise to get you out if this happened. Please, don't make me break that promise. Downstairs, men were rushing back and forth, shredding papers, hiding weapons. The front gates burst open as police cars streamed through. Shouts echoed across the grounds. Now, Alice, Marco urged, guiding me toward the cellar door. I ran down the stone steps, Lily wailing in my arms. The wine cellar stretched before me, rows and rows of bottles gleaming in the dim light. At the far end, Marco pushed aside a heavy rack to reveal a narrow passageway. Follow it to the end, he instructed. Don't stop for anything. The tunnel was damp and cold, barely wide enough for me to pass through with Lily. It smelled of earth and fear. Water dripped from the ceiling, splashing onto my hair, my shoulders. Lily's cries echoed off the stone walls. I whispered soothing nonsense to her as we moved forward, guided only by the weak beam of my phone flashlight. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, I reached a metal door. It opened onto a wooded area. Just as Marco had promised, a nondescript black car waited on a dirt track nearby. I strapped Lily into the car seat that was already installed in the back, then slid behind the wheel. My hands shook as I started the engine. The GPS directed me to a small cabin by a lake, 2 hours north of the city. It was simple but clean, with a kitchen stocked with food, a crib already set up in the bedroom. On the table, I found an envelope with $10,000 in cash and a note in Dominic's handwriting. Stay here. I'll find you when it's safe. Days turned into a week. I watched the news obsessively on the small TV in the cabin. Reports of a major organized crime takedown filled every channel. Riviera was dead, killed in the raid. Several of his top lieutenants, too. The Russo organization was described as crippled and under siege. But there was no mention of Dominic. Not among the arrested, not among the dead. On the 8th day, as a summer storm lashed the cabin with rain and wind, a car pulled up outside. I grabbed the gun Marco had shown me how to use before tucking it into my bag the day of the raid. With shaking hands, I moved to the window, peering through the curtains. A figure emerged from the car, hunched against the rain. Even through the downpour, I recognized the set of those shoulders, the way he moved. I dropped the gun and ran to the door, flinging it open. Dominic stood on the porch, soaking wet, his face gaunt with exhaustion. A fresh scar ran along his jawline, but he was alive, whole. "You're here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," I whispered, pulling him inside. "Where else would I go?" In the light of the cabin, I could see the toll the past days had taken. His eyes were shadowed with fatigue, his clothes rumpled and stained. But there was something different about his face, an openness I hadn't seen before, as if some burden had been lifted. "Are you hurt?" I asked, helping him out of his wet jacket. He shook his head. "Nothing serious." His eyes searched the cabin. "Lily?" "Sleeping," I said, nodding toward the bedroom. "She's fine, we're both fine." He sank onto the couch, running a hand over his face. "The house is gone, seized by the feds. Most of my men are either dead or in custody." "And you?" I sat beside him, not quite touching. "Officially, Dominic Russo died in the raid on Riviera's club," he said, a strange smile playing at his lips. "Convenient that." "I don't understand." He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I made a deal, Alice. With Reyes." My heart skipped. "What kind of deal?" "The only kind that mattered, one that kept you and Lily safe." He took a deep breath. "I gave them everything. Financial records, offshore accounts, names, dates. Everything they needed to take down Riviera and dismantle my father's organization. In exchange, I got new identities for us." "A clean slate." "Us?" I repeated, hardly daring to believe. "If you want there to be an us," he said softly, "I wouldn't blame you if you didn't." I searched his face. "What about blood demands blood? Family honor? All those things you said you had to uphold?" "I chose something else," he said simply. "Someone else." His eyes held mine. "I chose you. And Lily. And the chance to be better than my father ever was." "What happened at the club?" I asked. "The news said 5 people died." "Riviera and 4 of his men," Dominic confirmed. "They didn't go quietly when the feds arrived." A shadow crossed his face. "I was there, but not to kill him. To wear a wire. To get him to admit to killing my cousin. To other crimes. It was part of the deal with Reyes." "You could have been killed," I whispered. "I almost was," he admitted. "One of Riviera's men recognized me, started shooting. The feds returned fire. His hand touched the new scar on his jaw. I got lucky." "What happens now?" I asked, my mind spinning with the enormity of what he'd done. "Now we start over," he said. "New names, new place. Enough money hidden away to live comfortably, but nothing like before." He hesitated. "I understand if that's not what you want. If it's not enough." I laughed, the sound catching on a sob. "Not enough?" "Dominic, I was counting pennies for baby formula when you found me. I've never needed mansions or designer clothes." I moved closer, finally allowing myself to touch his face. "I just need you. The real you." "The real me is still figuring out who that is," he said honestly. "Without my father's shadow, without the family business, just me." "I'd like to help you figure it out," I whispered. He leaned his forehead against mine. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," I agreed with a small smile. "But you've got me anyway." The storm outside began to ease, rain softening to a gentle patter against the roof. In the bedroom, Lily made the little snuffling sounds that meant she was waking up. Dominic's head lifted at the sound, a smile spreading across his face. "Can I get her?" he asked, almost shyly. I nodded, watching as he moved quietly into the bedroom. A moment later, he returned with Lily in his arms, cradling her with that same surprising gentleness I'd first noticed months ago. She looked up at him, completely unafraid, and wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. "She remembers you," I said, feeling tears spring to my eyes. "I remember her too," he said softly. "Every day we were apart, I thought about you both. Whether you were safe, whether you'd wait." He looked up at me. "Whether I'd get the chance to be the man you thought I could be." "And will you?" I asked. "I'm going to try," he promised. "Every day, for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me." 1 year later, we stood on the deck of our new home, smaller than the mansion but overlooking the same bay. Lily took her first steps across the wooden planks, wobbling from my hands to Dominic's outstretched arms. He caught her, swinging her up into the air as she giggled with delight. "She's fearless," he said proudly, "like her mother." I joined them, wrapping my arms around them both. "She's protected," I corrected, "like we all are now." The scars of our old life remained. Sometimes Dominic still woke in the night, haunted by dreams of his father, of Riviera, of choices made and lives taken. Sometimes I still checked the locks 3 times before bed, still kept a go-bag packed in the closet. Old habits die hard. But there were new habits too. Morning walks on the beach, Sunday dinners with the few friends we'd made, bedtime stories read in English and Italian. Dominic was working legitimately now, using his business skills to turn around failing companies. I had finished my nursing degree and worked part-time at a local clinic. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked him that evening as we watched the sunset from our deck. "Giving up the power? The empire your father built?" "I traded one kind of power for another," he said, his fingers intertwining with mine. The scar on his face had faded slightly, like the sharper edges of his nature. The power to choose, to build something better, something that might actually last. As darkness fell over the water, lights from nearby houses began to twinkle like earthbound stars. Lily slept peacefully between us, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. The night wrapped around us like a blanket, warm and safe and full of promise. "We found each other in the darkest moment of our lives," I whispered, leaning my head against his shoulder, "and somehow created light." He kissed my temple, his lips lingering against my skin. "That light is everything," he murmured. "It's what saved me, what saves me still." In the distance, a boat's horn sounded low and melodic. The tide turned, waves lapping gently at the shore below our home. Our home, built not on fear or blood or vengeance, but on something far stronger, the choice to begin again, to be better, to love without conditions or limits. It wasn't perfect. Nothing real ever is, but it was ours, and that made all the difference.